Hi everybody, it's Lasha from High Voltage. Does anybody recognize me? Does anybody recognize where I am? Well, I do want to keep my location a secret. However, I want to discuss today about what's going on in Canada, and I know that I only have 15 seconds to get your attention in order for anybody to listen to me, because 6 million people try to start a YouTube channel every day. And I am off and cold sore and bad lipstick and probably one of the most spiritual awakenings I've ever had in my life. Does this look familiar to anybody? I want to talk about white-collar crime, the rentals in Ontario, the arbitration board, the Landlord and Tenant Act, family, trauma, and why we find ourselves in positions that we never thought we would find ourselves in. So, and does anybody recognize that? And do you remember Sophie used to be with me all the time? And I was looking at some of the footage on my channel and Trevor's channel, and Trevor's been a staunch supporter of mine and I of him, and I'm literally old enough to be his grandmother. And I know I only look like I'm about 19 years old, but here's the situation. All of you should go back, and over the last 2 years, March the 23rd of 2023 is the 2nd year anniversary that I started a YouTube channel. And the first channel was Lasha Rojenko, and I always joke and say it's Rojerko, but change the R to an N, Rojenko. And I started that channel on Consiglia Court in Grimsby. And we lived there for 6 years. And in Canada, and in Ontario specifically, and there is a law that or some kind of legislation or bylaw that transpired, I believe, in the Toronto area, where basically people who rent out cannot tell somebody they're moving in, not move in, and upgrade and then raise the rents. So, do you remember when I started Lasha Rojenko? If you go to that channel, please don't subscribe to it. And I'm being serious, because I really am trying to build a non-donation charity. I don't want to explain it all over again, because that's not the point of this video, and Sarah always told me to stay on track. So, because of brown collar crime, white collar crime, brown collar crime, we moved over there. And because of Dr. Corcola and what happened to my leg, which is on High Voltage, anything, and I started L&L Soul Sisters at Concord. And then we couldn't afford so here's the deal. We went to paying $14.75 a month, okay, for 6 years. It was first 14 and then 14, 15, it goes up a little bit every year. And, they were slumlords. There's just no way around it. And the problem that my mom and I had to get a decent place is because I hurt my leg. I broke my femur. The surgeon messed it up. It's all on the channel. It was a botched surgery. I had 3 corrective ones. I still have to write a book about the days and the hours of it, but I am dancing on my toes in ballet. I'm very proud of it. I worked at Yalla's for not even $15 an hour. And sometimes that's a whole other topic, but here's the deal. We were paying $14.75 a month, and I had Sophie, and she was my life. And it was in 2023. And do you remember I moved out and I got settled because my first video is April the 7th of 2023 at Concord, and I did not know how to execute any content. I didn't know what I was doing. I still don't know what I'm doing, but I've come up with a lot of different ideas because of Trevor's funny little clips, because everything is so serious and everything is about money, and my mind had never worked this way until today. So I hope today is March the 23rd of 2023, because I really don't know. And I thought to myself, how did I get from married woman to meeting Samantha, to having an issue, to giving my money away to my husband? And I want to say one thing before I continue down this spiral, is I'm writing a rap, because I'm a terrible guitar player, but I love it, about a fall from grace and what I've learned along the way, and the mistakes I've made and the choices I've made, and how when I represented that leadership course, and I thought, my God, Lasha, you used to teach this, and my skill has always been over empathizing. So even when I made really good money, I would never be at sacrifice of myself because I had the money to give. And I kept doing it and doing it. And because of the surgeon, the Ontario taxpayers paid for it. And then the hill just went down and down and down and down. And it was a circumstance. It was one of those things Jordan Peterson says, that it's an accident and you don't know. It's not your fault. This wasn't my fault. But my choices were, I put others before myself. And that's the lesson. And everybody around me seems to know this lesson but me. But when you're injured physically for 7 years, it affects you mentally, your cerebral cortex, your ability, your judgment. And because I had so much time to think about things that were completely innocuous to the average person that's living their life and would never understand, how did you get in this position? It's like those roommates I had. And I did a show about homelessness. And I said, and it could happen to me. And we're not. To the grace of God and to the people that surrounded themselves by me, and I'm not going to mention names, and it's a blessing in disguise, because Johnny Owen, for example, I just put up a short and I read that, and I read Candace Owens' response about 7 times, and how the universe will scoop you up. And if you need help, don't be so prideful that you won't ask for help. And like my friend said, you might be surprised. And which is almost a projection of why I started this channel 2 years ago to almost this day, probably. But what happened was we were paying $14.75, and because these people lied and they didn't move in, and I remember somebody told me if they do that, you can sue them. And it was this woman's birthday. The long story is I started a channel on Concord. We had to move